but she did it again. She really had me laughing and crying, and this book did have some grovel in it, so I did really love that. Please, dear God, make that worth something. Hey, hi, hello, welcome in or welcome back to my channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Today we're talking about the Kings of Sin series by Anna Huang. I'm gonna cover the first 4 books in the series, which are what are out right now, and then April 29th, King of Envy will be out. So this series is based off of 7 Kings of Sin, each book focusing on a different couple. They're interconnected stories, so the characters kind of show up before their books. Each book covers one specific couple. A lot of the women in the book so far have all been the same friend group, with the men being essentially the billionaire counterpart. The series does have a lot of characters that have been covered within the Twisted series, which is probably the most popular of Anna Huang's books. So those characters do come up here and there and make little cameos. There also is a small mention of her If Love series. If you are interested in reading the book, you definitely don't have to read those other series beforehand. The characters or mentions of their businesses or things that have happened in Anna Huang's other series do tend to come up in these stories. You definitely don't have to read Anna Huang's other books in order to enjoy these, but you might get a little something additional from seeing their cameos and mentions of things that have happened in other series. So to start out, the first book in the series is King of Wrath. Dante Russo is a billionaire CEO of a company. Vivian is an event planner coming from a family of jewelers who are more recently rich in making their money. Just from the description of the book, Dante is blackmailed into marrying Vivian. This is the general conflict of the story, unsurprisingly. He spends a lot of his book trying to think about how to get out of that blackmail situation, and Vivian herself does not know that Dante is being blackmailed. So this basically puts the story on a collision path of both Dante's blackmail and Vivian not knowing about the blackmail while they kind of fall in love. Really felt like a train kind of coming into an obstacle that you know is there throughout the entirety of the book. Everything kind of explodes. So Vivian is an event planner, but she has a really strong familial sense of duty. Dante is a billionaire, and he is the CEO of a luxury goods company. Of course, even though blackmail leads them together initially, they end up falling in love. This sets up a really complicated plot line where they're both conflicted about the marriage and that blackmail. So this book, Christian Harper comes up a lot, and he was covered in the Twisted series. So I'd say this book is most closely tied to Twisted Lies just because of how much Christian plays a role in the story. The books themselves seem to kind of happen in parallel to each other, and Bridget and Reese from Twisted Games also get mentioned a decent amount in the book. Vivian's sister herself lives in Eldora, which is where Bridget and Reese are, and that's the country that Bridget is queen of. Overall, even though there's mentions of those other books, I don't think it's super necessary to have read the Twisted series in order to enjoy the Kings of Sin, but they do get mentioned a little bit as kind of tying those series together. I did a tandem read of these stories in listening to the audiobook while reading the ebook, which I got through Kindle Unlimited. The audio was a duet, so 2 different voice actors between Dante and Vivian. I will note that Dante's accent is really confusing and kind of seems to peter off towards the end of the book. I think they were trying to make him Italian, but then to me it just sounded really weird and not placeable. The voice actors do have a lot of emotion, and I think that added a lot. Highly recommend the audiobook if you're an audiobook enjoyer. I already had loved Anna Huang's writing, but she did it again. She really had me laughing and crying. I was giggling at the dialogue between Dante and Vivian, and I will say the limo scene, chef's kiss, It was one of the greatest spice scenes I've ever read. And then Dante and Vivian, they just had such distinct personalities. They were pretty much opposites to each other, but that's what made the dialogue so snappy and fun. The relationship, just because of that blackmail aspect, was a bit hot and cold for Dante. And usually I have a really hard time with that, but I think it was done really, really well. The motivations for the characters were outlined and well described, and it just made everything seem a lot more realistic. I loved the way that Dante was able to open up to Vivian and give more details about his family and his background. His family story was really heartbreaking, and it was absolutely pivotal to describe why he is the way that he is in terms of his personality. I just really, really loved the way that he set up dates and did tiny little things for Vivian to make sure that she knew that he was thinking about her and that he cared for her. He's shown as kind of this workaholic character, but he will drop everything to be able to rush to Vivian and be at her side whenever something goes wrong. I do really like how the story took Vivian on a character growth arc in terms of her family and being able to stand up for herself and what she wanted with her life. Her being kind of given away to be married just for familial duty. I really liked that they both had really different sibling dynamics between their families and how that was kind of explored within the story. Dante and his little brother Luca, who ends up having other cameos within later Kings of Sin books. Dante and Luca being really close, with Luca being kind of this party animal, and eventually you learn he's the main reason for Dante's blackmail. And then Vivian and her sister being close and also feeling that familial duty. Her sister also being part of an arranged marriage. She ends up really happy and in love with who she ends up with. It was just really great to see them both share their family dynamics and use that as a way to grow together and have kind of outside character growth outside of that romantic relationship. The plot felt like it was a really good speed, kind of a medium-paced plot where you get to learn a lot about the characters, you get to see that slow burn buildup of the enemies to lovers, see that some of those issues in the blackmail kind of come to a peak in terms of action and get resolved. The book starts out pretty quickly knowing about the blackmail, and you kind of see the train hitting the conflict. There is some action sprinkled in, which was highly appreciated, and it was pretty tense. And then even though you know the main conflict of the plot and can see it coming, I think that really did enhance how interesting the story was, because you could just see things coming to a conflict towards the end and not really know how things are going to play out or how this is going to be resolved into a happy ending. I will say I am a fan of a man groveling, and this book did have some grovel in it, so I did really love that. And I really appreciate when the main female character doesn't just bend and bow to whatever the main male character thinks. She doesn't just immediately forgive him for what he does. Now for some of the kind of main action in the plot that happens about halfway through, give or take. I absolutely sobbed at the jewelry store in its aftermath. I felt emotions I was not expecting. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Vivian's emotions and her reaction were just so raw and real, and I just really loved how that was captured. Part of the story, not just Vivian and Dante's story, this is where some of the characters start getting introduced that will take place in later books. So Kai and Isabella having book 2, they get introduced as characters and have super bright and vibrant personalities. Overall, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, which is a pretty high rating for me. I remember kind of debating between 4.75 and 5, and I eventually just landed on 5 stars. I really just think every element of the story really came together to make a really great 5-star read. The conflict and the rationale of the characters around their actions really made a lot of sense. It just felt really fully balanced between the action and the plot. The conflicts just had such great basis in reality that it just made sense. It really just felt like I was hopping onto a train where I knew it was where it was going with the blackmail. It was like watching a train hoping it would go off the tracks and derail, while not really knowing how that kind of journey would end. I really loved the book, highly recommend it if you liked Ana Huang's other writing. Book 2 is King of Pride, and this is Kai and Isabella's story. Isabella is a bartender at Valhalla, which is the club that all of the rich billionaire CEOs go to, and Kai is a member of a big media conglomerate company that is run by his family. His mom is going to be stepping down, so he is kind of up next for CEO. There's a big rule in Valhalla that the bartenders and the club members can't fraternize and commingle, so that is kind of the setup for the conflict of the main story with them getting together. Kai is very proper, has a lot of etiquette. Isabella's kind of the opposite. She's chaotic and fun. I will say I was kind of let down by this book just because of the core conflict. The plot just didn't really feel like it had that high of stakes other than Isabella's bartending job kind of hinging on her not being in a relationship with Kai, and then Kai trying to get the CEO position, which is almost kind of guaranteed to him as part of his family. I think I would have enjoyed the book a little bit more if the stakes were a little bit higher. For the plot, not much really actually happened external to them other than those kind of job struggles. Isabella has kind of a secret that gets revealed, which takes those stakes down even farther. It just ended up making the book seem like the conflicts were just based in such first world problems. And I really loved their characters so much. I just wish something more was done with them. Just the absolute privilege that is Isabella's core conflict is really kind of dumb once her secret's revealed. If I was in her situation, I would just sit down and buckle up. I ended up just feeling no sympathy for her feelings just based off of her situation. It's hard to feel bad when she's describing her insecurities about her writing and career when that's the situation she's in. And then Kai's core conflict of the story in trying to eventually become his CEO. Again, the stakes just seemed so low, and the solution to the problems was basically just a phone call up to Christian Harper and then getting the solution just dropped right into Kai's hands. It just felt like that conflict had no work to resolve it. And then by the end of the book, it just really felt like so much work talk rather than a focus on the relationship. It just felt like it was describing like billionaire major shareholder of a company problems, and I just really didn't care that much. I did catch a few times where interactions between Kai and Isabella that had happened in King of Wrath as the first book got brought up again in the second book, and I would say it's probably really pivotal to read King of Wrath before reading King of Pride. While you could read it as an interconnected standalone, I think some of those kind of basis moments of Kai and Isabella's relationships happened in King of Wrath, so not seeing those I think would be a detriment in reading this book without reading King of Wrath. Anna Huang has this kind of theme in her writing where she'll take sentences or phrases from things that have happened in previous conversations, previous books, and she'll just italicize them as kind of reminders of what had happened before. That does happen within this book if you did need a reminder of specific dialogue and conversations that have happened in King of Wrath, but I think it would just have more impact if you would have actually read the book. Even though Kai plays it pretty cool at the start, it's pretty clear that he's obsessed with Isabella right off the bat. It didn't really feel like there was any emotional conflict within the book, and a lot of it was generally hinging on their jobs and trying to either keep their job or get the job of CEO. Again, this was just very work focused of a book. A quick moment for Kai and Dante's relationship. Why did I kind of like their relationship almost more than Isabella and Kai? I really did like how Kai and Isabella's inner monologue was written. It really helped to show that they were both into each other and both equally hesitant to give in to their crushes. I did get a little bit frustrated how long it went and how they just wouldn't just talk to each other and communicate their feelings. And then one thing that bugged me so extremely much, they go to this art studio. They have a little fun art date. So they go to this art date to this warehouse that has like an art collective within it, but then at one point they like take their coats off and leave them in the warehouse, and then they go downstairs and it's a rave at like midnight. Number one, who's raving at midnight? That sounds like a 2 a.m. activity. And number two, how are all of these people in a rave in a club in the basement, yet in the art studio there's one other person hanging out there? Like, how could you, number one, like have a rave and art studio studio in the same building and have one person in the art studio and a ton of people downstairs at the rave not be able to hear the, bass and loud music that would be in a rave. It literally just made me so mad. And especially the leaving the coats out and not picking them up, just like leaving them in the art studio so that you don't have to deal with them. I think the logic behind that whole scene just ended up breaking my brain. It just was so unrealistic and took me out of the story when they could have literally just went to an art studio, drove to a rave, and then did the rave thing. And kind of a general comment on the series as a whole. Dark romance is kind of one of the tags of the genres of the book, but this book definitely didn't have like any elements of dark romance to it. It just was a sweet, nice billionaire romance. Overall, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. That's a pretty big change from the 5 out of 5 that I gave King of Wrath. Just in general, this book gave me huge whiplash from King of Wrath just because the quality of the plot just really, really went down, it seemed to me. Especially when you have two characters that have such vibrant personalities. It just felt like that potential was squandered. I did have strong faith that the rest of the books were going to be a little bit better, and that's what kind of kept me reading. Otherwise, I just didn't like this book as much, and that's mainly because of the plot and sort of lack thereof. The third book is King of Greed. So this is Alessandra and Dominic's story. Alessandra and Dominic start out as already married. They have a long relationship back in college where they first got started. Alessandra was Dominic's tutor for English, and then they ended up falling in love and getting married. Dominic had started out with basically no money. He was in school on a scholarship, and then he built this kind of mega empire of, I believe, investments that he works on. So he has this super large life change from when he first met Alessandra in starting a company and starting his business to now being a billionaire CEO. But in him making all of this money, he basically puts his relationship with Alessandra on the background, and he becomes this huge workaholic, which basically destroys their relationship. So the book kind of starts out from the point of their relationship not working out. Alessandra gets a divorce from him, and the whole book is essentially their path towards getting together again and re-falling in love. So I really, really love this story in the sense that it's not just your typical billionaire CEO romance where they actually are in love and it is a second chance for them to fall in love again. I feel like I really haven't seen too many books where you have the characters fighting to keep a relationship rather than building a new relationship. Obviously, because it is focused on them getting back together, there really isn't that much plot. It's basically just a full book of grovel for Dominic to win Alessandra back. At the end, I was just begging for a tidbit of plot outside of the romantic relationship. The ending itself felt so rushed, and it just didn't feel finished, honestly. I was really prepared to rate it even higher than the rating that I'll give it. It just felt like the ending was squandered. I love how in-depth the book got into Dominic, his dyslexia, growing up in a foster home with his brother Roman. That background made the book make a lot of sense for Dominic and how he grew up and how he ended up being a workaholic, which then destroyed his relationship. That part made the story feel really real, but I absolutely hated where the book took the plot, especially with Roman. It just felt like the drama of the plot just really didn't get resolved, even though Dominic and Roman got a little bit closer to each other. I just really don't know where this kind of Roman being shady and a mercenary plot line is going to go. It obviously is going to bleed into later books, but I swear to God, I hope this gets resolved in some way that makes the plotline of this book worth it. And then with this book being kind of a full grovel, I really did like how Alessandra as a main female character had a really strong backbone and stuck to her decisions. I ended up giving it a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and I think that's mainly because of how much I liked the grovel. The plot really let me down in this one, and I just felt like it really wasn't finished, which is the main reason why I gave it a 3.75. It kind of hurts to even give it that low. I just can't forgive the plot. And then book 4, King of Sloth. So this book is Sloane and Javier's story. Javier, I will give a note. I did listen to the audiobook, which is why I'm calling him Javier, because the name is spelled like Xavier. I haven't ever heard of a Javier spelled like Xavier, but I never would have guessed that without listening to the audiobook. So Sloane, she's shown up in previous books before as kind of the main friend group as a group of girls. She's a publicist, and Javier is one of her clients. Javier is this kind of rich man that's living off of a trust fund, and he's a huge partier. His father is kind of on his deathbed, and the whole book kind of centers around him trying to keep his inheritance, which is billions of dollars from his father. Sloane is his publicist, so she's trying to keep him out of trouble and trying to sort of help him navigate when his father dies and he needs to then become a CEO in order to keep his inheritance. This book itself, I can really kind of describe it as the queen of scathing reviews of rom-coms finds her blockbuster happy ending. Overall, I really thought this was a cute story of Sloane and Javier in working together for so many years and then that relationship turning romantic. Both of them have extremely messy backgrounds with their families, which gives them a lot of room for character growth and development, as well as bonding between them, which is definitely taken advantage of within the story. They both have a lot of drama with their families. That drama between their families seems to really make them pair together well and helps them understand each other. It really grounds them in their personalities and the reasons of why they are the way that they are. I love that the book started off right from the point of Javier having feelings for Sloane. It really helped to drive the plot line and have the story move a little bit faster. They also have a lot of chemistry together. I really enjoyed seeing Javier's character growth from being kind of this partier trust fund baby into growing his own company as a CEO. I will say a little carryover from King of Greed was this Roman mercenary plot line happening in the background and still being tied to the story. Again, I really hope later books resolve this. Really, really hope so. Otherwise, I'm going to actually be mad. Please, dear God, make that worth something. I also really enjoyed the mentions of Vuk and Ayana, who are going to get the next book, King of Envy. I'm super intrigued in their story and how much they were mentioned in this book and tied into Sloane and Javier's plot lines within their jobs and careers. Overall, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really solid. It had a little bit more plot and definitely a lot more character growth for each character, especially with their relationships with their families. So I thought this was pretty good. Still 4 out of 5. I just wish they did something, again, a little bit more with the mercenary plot line that they keep hinting at. It did feel really well-rounded, and I did really like how they took advantage of Sloane's romantic comedy reviews and really made the story into kind of a Hollywood happy ending for her. So my overall thoughts for the series and reading the 4 books that are out so far. I just really don't think this is dark romance. It's a billionaire romance for sure. I would say it's like dark romance adjacent rather than dark romance itself. The closest thing you get to dark romance is a little bit of blackmail, either used or hinted at within the stories, and then this weird background, like secret mercenary group plot line that keeps getting hinted at and not really used. So maybe that'll be a bigger part in later stories. I wouldn't call this series a dark romance. It's definitely a billionaire contemporary romance. There are some larger time jumps within the story which really help kind of ground the character relationships in reality and gives them sort of a jumping board to go off of into each story. And then there's also a lot of characters from the Twisted series and the If Love series. I would say this series has pretty similar vibes to the Twisted series, if not maybe a little bit less action. And then if you were going to choose between Kings of Sin and the Twisted series, I'd recommend starting out with the Twisted series. Not only that it takes place chronologically first, I do think that the series itself is a little bit better in terms of having plots that wrap up well. And then the series as a whole started out really strong with the first book, and then it kind of petered off. The plots didn't really feel like they had as much action or as much was riding on the stakes of the plot. So I just wish there were a little bit of higher stakes, maybe a little bit more action thrown in, along with the huge focus on the romance within the stories. I do really think these books are pretty light on plot and very heavy on the romance. And then some of the books did really give a lot of character growth. I will say it's very strong in terms of personalities of the characters and their character growth arcs. Again, I just kind of wish there was a little bit more plot to each of the stories. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below if you're thinking about reading this series. Did you like this series? Have you read Twisted If Love, Anna Huang's other writing? Let me know your thoughts. All right, catch you in the next video.